conversation on hand grinder safety here. In this video, we're going to talk about how to do the inspection on the entire grinder to make sure that it's safe to use. We've already talked about what you can use this for and all the personal protective equipment that you need to wear. We've also talked about the different types of wheels and how to properly install those types of wheels, all in previous videos. And again, in this video, we're going to inspect this machine. So I go to grab a hand grinder. I cannot assume that this hand grinder is ready to use, because I do not know if somebody else dropped it, which cracked the wheel. I don't know if maybe they used it on aluminum. I don't know if they actually ended up wrecking the cord while they were working. And I don't know if the handguard's set up properly. So these are things we're going to inspect. So first thing I'm concerned about is, how does this wheel look? I take a look at this wheel. I don't see any cracks and big chips and chunks missing. I take a look at the nut and I see that it is set up properly. Watch my previous video on installing wheels to understand that. So I've set this is installed properly. If the nut was on with the lip facing out, then it would be installed improperly and I have to fix that. I also don't trust that it's tight. So I'm gonna push the lock button, lock the wheel, spin it until it locks. And I'm going to put the wrench on and I'm going to tighten that. Yes, it is tight. Don't assume that it's tight. It may not be, and you don't want to find out when you get hurt. You want to look at that up front. Next thing I'm concerned about is this guard set up properly, or am I going to actually cut my hand? If this guard was set up like that, there is nothing protecting my fingers from coming into contact with that blade. And that is, when you're working, you can actually have a situation where your tool bucks or kicks or jams, and that's the time where you're gonna have a problem. So let's make sure that this handguard is not only hard to turn, that's very hard for me to turn, which is a good thing, that it's set up beyond half. So it's not set up where I can still kind of get up and over that guard. It's set up beyond that point so that I actually have this extra lip protecting my fingers when I put my fingers out. That would be proper setup. This also is going to help us direct the sparks. So if I was grinding, it would send the sparks out that way. And if I was a left-handed person with this handle, which is in place, this handle was on the other side of this machine, then I would have to set things up a little differently. Okay? There it is, I'm left-handed, I'm grinding on the left side. Now, I have this problem again, and I'm also going to be sending sparks probably directing towards my hand, so I'm going to adjust that spark guard so that it's giving me full protection. And make sure it's tight. If not, there is a screw head here. You can take a screwdriver to that to tighten that up so that it's not loose. If it's loose, it's going to move. If you get a kickback or a buck, it's going to move on you and it's not going to protect you. So make sure that that screw there is tight enough that this guard doesn't want to shift too easily. This is the hand guard here. Make sure that you have a handguard installed. You are not allowed to use this hand grinder by holding it like that. Okay? That's not acceptable. We need to have a handguard installed. And the handguard, you have to inspect it to make sure that this lip is intact. If that lip is broken off, I need to replace that handle. It's not safe for you to use because that is also part of making sure that your hand doesn't slip off into the wheel. This lip is protecting me from slipping so far that my hand comes in contact. So we need to have that lip installed and we need to make sure that it's not broken off. All right, handguard is tight. Next thing I want to inspect is, does this thing have a trigger lock? So here's the trigger, turn it on and off, and this one has a trigger lock, which would lock it in the on position. So if I pull this trigger and push the trigger lock and slowly let go, that trigger lock holds this on. Now, if I squeeze it, that unlocks it. And there it is. You have to take a look at that because if somebody left this trigger lock in and you go to plug this thing in, it's going to turn on immediately. So just make sure before you plug something like this in, give it a couple flicks, make sure that it's not locked. And finally, I'm going to inspect the cord. Take a look at the entire length of the cord, looking for cracks and looking for frays and cuts, because hand grinder cords often do get nicks in them from improper use. So I'm looking at this entire thing, and I'm not seeing any cuts or nicks that I need to be concerned about. If there is a cut or a nick, you have to immediately bring this grinder to the teacher, and the teacher will either take it out of commission and get it repaired, or the teacher may decide that it's minor and he can use electrician's tape to fix it, but you cannot use it you have to go to a teacher if there's any problem with the cord. Otherwise, you run the risk of electrocution while you're using the equipment. So those are all the things that we're inspecting on this hand grinder. Again, recap, inspect the wheel to make sure it's safe to use, and inspect it that it's installed properly. Set up the hand guard properly, make sure it's tight. Make sure there's a handle in place. Check the trigger that it's not in the on position, and check that entire cable before you go ahead and plug this thing in.